All right, hello everyone. I'll just give just a few seconds for people to kind of file in and get settled. All right, so we have 1,000 people registered today, so expecting a pretty large group, and I'll try to go through this quickly so we can get to as many questions as possible. Very familiar, I'm imagining at this point, with Zoom. This is Zoom webinar, so there are a few differences from the normal meeting platform. The first of which is that your microphones and cameras are not enabled, so you don't have to worry about interrupting or being seen or heard or anything like that. You can still use the chat feature just like in meetings. You can use that to address the panelists only. You can do private chats, or you can choose to address all attendees. You just have to select the proper audience from the drop-down menu by the little 2 in the chat window. But we're asking any questions you have for the presenters, you put those in the Q&A feature. With so many people coming through, we need to try to manage those questions as effectively as we can, and it's really hard to do so through the chat. So again, want to reiterate, use the Q&A feature for any questions. You can ask questions anonymously. You can see questions that have already been asked. You can add comments to those questions, and you can upvote ones that you really want to see answered. So I'll type that out in chat just so people joining later on can see it. But without further ado, I want to hand it off to Melanie Gottlieb.
Thank you so much, Mike. Good afternoon. I'm Melanie Gottlieb, Deputy Director of AACRAO, and I'd like to welcome you to today's AACRAO coffee break on athletics eligibility in times of crisis. It's a pleasure to be on the line with all of you today as we navigate the challenges presented by the COVID-19 crisis together. Next slide. Today we have colleagues representing the Collegiate Athletics Associations to share their updates and resources for institutions during this time of crisis. With me today we have Felicia Martin, Vice President of the NCAA Eligibility Center, Dr. Christopher Parker, President and CEO at NJCAA, and Leah McCormick, Vice President of Business Development and Eligibility Services at the NAIA. I especially want to thank these dedicated colleagues who've given us their time and their expertise while navigating this crisis within their own organizations. Thank you. As always, we are hopeful that our technology will not fail us. This is a large Zoom call with a number of panelists, and we're all working at the mercy of our home Wi-Fi. We're not using the video function, and your mics are muted so as to save on bandwidth. There will be time at the end of the call for Q&A at the end of the panels, but with so many of you on the call, we know that we may not be able to answer all of your questions. Rest assured, anything that we don't get to will be collected and responded to and added to the ever-growing list of policy questions that our guidance team is working through every day. It may resurface as an article in our Connect newsletter, a specific guidance document, or even another coffee break. When you ask your questions, please be sure to name the organization that you would like to answer the question if it is directed at a specific organization. Next slide. As you navigate the challenges in this crisis, your association is here to connect you with network colleagues to work together through these challenges in this time of unprecedented disruption in our profession. We've opened up our content vaults here at AACRAO to the higher education community through our free 3-month membership option. If your membership has lapsed, or if there are others on your campus that you want to have access to our resources to support you through this transition, we hope that you will consider this option. You can find that option on our website or email membership@acrao.org for more information. Next slide. You can also find on the AACRAO website, for those of you in the records area, the AACRAO Professional Development Guidelines for Registrars, a self-assessment. We know that athletics eligibility in higher education often rests in the registrar's office, and this particular book is a book of questions designed to prompt data collection and analysis of your policies and practices, and it does include sections on athletics eligibility. You can find that online at the AACRAO bookstore. Next slide. AACRAO has worked diligently to provide specific guidance to institutions as they navigate decision-making on their campuses to adapt and serve their students. To build our guidance, we used established AACRAO standards and re-envisioned them through the lens of the current COVID-19 crisis, and then consulting with subject matter experts from our board of directors and amongst the membership and across higher education. Who is the guidance team? Executive Director Michael Riley, myself, Associate Executive Directors Tom Green and Tina Deneen, and Director of Research Wendy Kilgore, all of us former campus-based professionals with years of experience in the AACRAO professions, along with the Director of Government Relations, William Gill. While this may not be the way AACRAO has typically released new guidance, we are balancing our processes of member development best practices with the needs to address the current crisis with something immediate to support you as you navigate this new normal. We want to give you guidance that is thoughtful and well-developed yet timely. I hope you'll access that page at acrao.org/COVID guidance. If you have suggestions for the guidance team to consider, please don't hesitate to contact us through the contact form on that page. Again, that address is acrao.org/COVID guidance. Next slide. Since the onset of the current crisis, AACRAO has deployed 3 practice snapshot surveys to gain insight into the challenges and evolving practices at our institutions. You can find the complete results on our website at acrao.org/COVID guidance. We will have a 4th survey, which will be an update of previously asked and still relevant questions that we'll deploy on May 8th. We found it's important to capture the rapidly evolving practices and the rapid decision-making that's happening at your institutions, and we want to support you and share that information. So look for that. The data will be released before the end of the month once that survey completes. And now I would like to turn the mic over to Felicia.
Thank you, Melanie. I appreciate this invitation and the opportunity to be with you today. As nice as it is to be a part of this dialogue, I can't help but to consider why this gathering is necessary. This health pandemic is affecting all of humanity. The care and compassion that we've offered to each other has been inspiring, and it keeps me hopeful. These days will pass. We will get through this together. The NCAA Eligibility Center is dedicated to being a compassionate partner as we navigate these waters. Speaking of the NCAA Eligibility Center, I want to share just a little bit of information about the work we do. I can imagine with a group this large, there are those of you who are very familiar with us and maybe even colleagues that we've worked with before. But for those who might not be as familiar with the Eligibility Center, I want you to know that we work with all sports from both Divisions 1 and 2, and we do so with a staff of around 50. That staff, that dedicated staff of subject matter experts, they're charged with addressing questions and concerns through our contact center. We review high schools and coursework. We complete academic and amateurism certifications. We process initial eligibility waivers. We have education outreach and any other service needed to support our membership and the 8 million high school student athletes who may be considering college and participating in college sports. Everything we do matters, and it impacts the prospective student athletes' experience. Even as we were trying to process the personal ripple effects of COVID-19, we were also acknowledging the reality of the circumstance and how it has impacted our students and our stakeholders. We understood that the priority for most local communities was health and safety, sheltering in place. Then high schools had to figure out how to keep the learning alive. We considered the challenge of lengthy school closures, canceled spring terms, canceled standardized tests, and the unexpected shift to a full-time remote learning environment. Additionally, there were schools that opted to not assign grades, but instead use a pass-fail system, not to mention official documents that might not be available due to school closures or mail disruptions. Once we had an idea of the major issues, we addressed them through the NCAA D1 and D2 governance processes with support from the NCAA research staff. Governance processes are, in essence, our membership-driven decision-making. It consists of university presidents, faculty athletic representatives, directors of athletics, senior women administrators, conference administrators, and student athletes. This group reviewed information and made some decisions, understanding that there is no one-size-fits-all remedy. However, we did want to present solutions that were best possible outcomes for college-bound student athletes in the member schools. I know the attendees on this call relate to having to delicately navigate a liquid and unpredictable state. We made decisions based on the information we had available to us at that time. On Friday, April 11, the Eligibility Center released the EC COVID-19 response. High school students intending to play Division I or Division II sports whose final semesters of their senior year was disrupted by the pandemic, this offered a pathway for them to meet the NCAA initial eligibility requirements this year. If you visit the link on the slide, or you can even go to the ncaa.org and click the banner titled COVID-19 information, there you'll find a variety of resources, videos, news releases, updates related to the coronavirus. The COVID-19 automatic waiver is indeed an opportunity and available to college-bound student athletes expected to graduate this spring 2020 or summer 2020 and are planning to attend college full-time in 2020. It's applicable to domestic, international, and homeschool students. COVID-19 automatic waiver is athletics aid, practice, and competition, provided that students are able to meet the following. For students who are interested in Division I, they meet the core course progression requirements. That's 10 core courses, 7 which have to be English, math, or science before the start of the 7th semester and present a 2.3 or higher GPA. For students interested in Division II, they must complete 10 core course units before the start of the 7th semester and present a 2.2 or higher. For the spring 2020 and summer 2020 high school graduates, we will not require an ACT or SAT score to be on file as part of the certification. Based on the constraints of the COVID pandemic and the constraints that have been placed on the testing agencies, we will not require ACT or SAT to be on file. This is limited to students who are graduating this spring 2020 and summer 2020. And it's determined by the year 9 grade. Again, this is only an exception for summer 2020 and spring 2020. It doesn't mean that we're removing the standardized test requirement from the initial eligibility standard. A couple of other items that might be of note for the group. For high schools working remotely, they still have the option to upload official student documents directly to the Student Athletes Eligibility Center account. Official academic records should be submitted via an approved channel whenever possible. For many students, however, if their school's closed or there's limited access to those needed official records that are lost, starting immediately, we'll accept unofficial documents sent from the email address associated with the Student's Eligibility Center account. For NCAA approved core courses completed in spring 2020 or summer 2020 that have been issued a grade of pass, the Eligibility Center will apply the credit earned in those courses toward the core course requirement and the student certification. We'll continue to monitor the COVID-19 situation as it evolves. We'll work with the membership and with our governance structure and adjust as the circumstance requires. All of these developments, additional updates will be updated to the website and our FAQ. We try and get an update if there is one by the end of each week. Again, thank you so much for this opportunity to be here, and I look forward to your comments and questions. Chris, you're up.
Thank you, Felicia. I want to personally thank AACRAO for the invitation. Also, I want to thank our colleagues, Felicia and Leah with the NCAA and NAIA. We can't be successful without their partnership and the relationships that are there. So thank you to both of those organizations. In our case, 99% of our schools are open enrollment. So getting information in, getting your students to apply, getting their applications done, FAFSAs completed is essential. But having that done as soon as possible also is a good thing, because we know that things are going to shuffle and move back and forth. As far as the academic trajectory, the current students, we have made an exception for any students that were enrolled full-time in the spring of 2020. We are reducing the carry forward to be eligible in the fall by 6 hours. So the normal 24 hours of maintaining 24 hours to be eligible, we are reducing that by 6 for the fall, with the expectation they're catching back up during the summer, fall, and winter hours. So again, that big exception is due to all the hardships that many community college students may have now that they're at home with Wi-Fi and those types of things in rural areas, is they must have 6 hours passed versus 12 only going into the fall 2020 semester to compete. They will be caught back up for the spring. That's something that we've pushed very hard to maintain their status towards graduation and completion. Very key, very essential to getting them to that point. The other aspect of understanding what they need to transfer. There are different rules and different obligations with both the NCAA and the NAIA, and we want to help them fulfill those obligations at all times. However, at the same time, even if a student athlete was not able to complete 6 hours this spring due to mitigating circumstances, we still have generated a special appeals committee to hear those. We do not want to necessarily penalize students who had absolutely no resources, showed the support, have the documentation and the verification to help them be prepared to succeed. And sports is really one of their driving forces to get them into the fall back as a full-time student. So we have developed a special appeal committee in those instances. We have no idea how many students may apply for that, but it has been generated, and there will be 3 dates in which administrators, registrars, coaches have to submit that information by, and that information is actually being published today, later today at 3 o'clock, to go out to all of our members and those that are in need. But those are the key things from the two-year college aspect to understand is get your applications done, get your FAFSA, all the information done. Recruiting is still virtual. So reaching out to coaches and administrators of different schools virtually, phone, text message, email, Zoom, FaceTime, whatever it may be, is critical. But again, the one-time exemption, rather than 24 hours going into fall 2020, if they were full-time in the spring, there is an exemption of 18 of hours. So that's the main thing to take notice of with the NJCAA right now. And look forward to your questions later. And again, I'll turn it over to Leah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parker. Appreciate it. I wanted to talk a little bit about the NAI. This is Leah from the NAI Eligibility Center. The NAI similarly took an approach, as Dr. Parker and Felicia have mentioned today, to just try to understand the full impacts. So we took a broad approach to try to understand what changes to eligibility needed to occur for the years ahead. Just a little bit about the NAIA. So we are the experts in the business of small college athletics, and our members make up about 250 institutions across the US and Canada. In the NAIA, students are able to receive athletic eligibility aid, and we have about 27 national championships across all of our sports. Similar to the NCAA, students do need to register for that first-time eligibility, and that can be done at playnai.org. The NAIA looks at eligibility of all first-time student athletes, which is encompassing of those entering freshmen as well as transfer students. So even students coming from the NJCAA, as Chris just spoke about, they also need to register with playnai.org and receive that decision of eligible before competing at one of our member institutions. There's a couple of key eligibility differences that I think are important to note, which have basically meant that there aren't as many impacts regarding failure, pass and failure grades, et cetera, because the NAI does not have core course requirements for entering freshmen. And instead, we're looking at a cumulative GPA overall of a 2.0 or higher. The other elements to the entering freshman requirements were around completion of a minimum SAT or ACT test score, or graduating in the top 50% of a student's class. Given all of the impacts that COVID has had, especially with the testing services, that has been waived. And so similar to what you've just heard on our counterparts side, the NAI has made an exception to that entering freshman, which basically enables a student to be academically eligible for athletic scholarship and competition in the NAI, provided that they graduate high school and achieve a 2.0 GPA. If the student ends up using that requirement rather than relying on the standard 2 out of 3 requirements, then they would also need to meet a collegiate GPA of 2.0 before going into their second year. So our governing bodies looked at this and thought that that was a good balance between ensuring academic readiness and also providing many opportunities for students given the current state. So we took a flexible approach and we said, we knew that we had the canceled spring seasons. And so there are a number of positive things for student athletes who were impacted by that canceled spring season that the NAI enacted. Namely, it gives all those student athletes an additional spring season of competition. They will not be charged for competition competing in the spring of 2020. And it gives students an extra year academically as well. So in the NAI, they get 10 terms of attendance. And so now students enrolled in the spring of 2020 will actually get 12, which is basically giving them the opportunity to use that additional season. There are no negative impacts to distance or e-learning courses. All of those are acceptable. And like I said before, pass-failed grades, because we have a cumulative GPA requirement, pass-fail grades are not going to negatively impact a student's eligibility. The one caveat, of course, is that if the student was relying on a grade of an A or a B to boost that GPA above the 2.0 mark, the student may not have the opportunity to rely on that if they're going pass-fail. That's the one note on that front. The additional point of note is that high school graduation is still required, and this exception does apply to international, homeschooled, and entering freshmen. However, the high school graduation requirement is still intact for all of those groups. And the homeschooled students in the NAI already have a mechanism for automatic eligibility through an elevated test score. That is still in place, and if they do not meet that or could not take that test, then they have the opportunity to apply for a homeschool review committee waiver, and that process is still intact. Additionally, there's another avenue for eligibility, which is that the GED completion of that does meet the 2.0 minimum, and that would meet the automatic eligibility exception for this year. I want to point out just a couple of different changes to how to send transcripts during this time. The NAI Eligibility Center will continue to require that high school transcripts are sent through the NAI portal, which is a mechanism for high school counselors to directly and securely upload high school transcripts to our center. And collegiate registrars actually also have the opportunity to create an account. So for students transferring to the NAI, registrars are able to create a portal account. However, we also accept collegiate transcripts sent to us by a number of approved e-vendors or through the mail. International students, we also are recommending to send electronically through our partnered service INCRED evaluations as the fastest way to get their records to us, just given this, the challenges that are being faced around the mail and getting physical records. So as we look to you all are key partners in this process to help students transition and realize their college dreams. So we just want to thank you all as registrars, as counselors, as admissions officers for all the work that you do to help student athletes find that right fit and be able to continue to compete. For registrars, like I said, we invite you to create that portal account, which will help streamline the submission of official records for students. And high school counselors, we invite to create an online portal account if they do not already have one. We also have an updates page on the NAI homepage to provide any and all updates. If there are potentially additional changes coming down the pathway, we will be putting those updates on our main NAI.org COVID page, as well as an FAQ page directed at eligibility questions, legislative, etc. So we invite you to join those pages. And I also believe AACRAO is going to make available resources for everyone at the conclusion of this call. So I will turn it back over to Melanie to go into the Q&A section.
Melanie, you might be muted. You're still muted, actually. Well, in the meantime, I just put in the chat area there a link to download a PDF of this slide deck. There's not much to it, but that way you'll be able to get to the links that everybody has talked about.
Hi, Mike, I'm here.
Okay, sweet.
My apologies, my internet dropped just as the mic was about to be passed to me. So we have quite a few questions, and I'm gonna sort through, and there are a couple that I think that would be well answered by all of these services that are a little less specific. So I'm gonna start with questions around standardized testing. So I see several questions that ask about flexibility for current juniors regarding standardized testing. So hearing about standardized testing scores being waived for spring, summer 2020, are there any impacts being considered for students graduating in 2021? And maybe we start with Felicia and then kind of go down the line. Just wondering if this is just me.
Yes, he is not.
Okay, so let's move on to Christopher.
Yep, I'm here.
All right, and we'll come back to Felicia. Did you hear the question, Christopher?
I did not.
All right. So the question had to do with standardized testing. For those of you who offer standardized testing, what flexibility is there going to be for current juniors? Is anyone suggesting, in addition to waiving standardized testing requirements for spring and summer for 2020, are there 2021 impacts for standardized testing?
The unique aspect for NJCAA student athletes is standardized testing is not required. You do not have to take the ACT or SAT to be admitted to 90% of the two-year colleges around the country. So that will be the same practice and policy moving forward. However, we always encourage those students to take them because they often earn them more institutional financial aid with those aspects, and that's going to be a college by college basis, as well as having them as they transfer to a four-year school. So for us, those processes are already in place as far as kind of the open admission. You must be a high school graduate or have your GED. You must have a 2.0 to come in, but standardized tests, ACT, SATs are not a requirement for entry into majority, close to 90+% of our institutions.
Okay. Leah from NAIA?
Yes, the NAIA's approach to this was to look at the immediate impact for the students incoming for fall of 2020. So as it stands right now, the exception is for those entering freshmen for the upcoming term of fall 2020. So as of right now, we have not considered if this carries over to students entering in future terms. But the idea would be that in a year from now, the students would again have those options related to the testing service. So I would not anticipate that the exception would carry forward into fall of 2021. There will be no lasting implications that will negatively impact a student's eligibility if they went distance learning or have pass-fail grades on their transcripts from this time frame. So that will have a lasting positive impact in that it won't harm their eligibility going forward. But my guess is that we would be back to a kind of a normal environment where the test score would be required in the future.
All right. Is Felicia back on?
Can you hear me now, Melanie?
We
Yep.
can.
Awesome. I'm so sorry. I had a little hiccup there with technology. The response for the NCAA initial eligibility for D1 and D2 is much like my colleague. So right now, the exception for spring 2020 and summer 2020 grads is just for seniors. We'll continue to monitor it to be sure that if we need to make additional adjustments, we can do those in advance, giving those juniors the opportunity to if there is a modified standard. But as of right now, we have not considered applying the exception for the standardized test for juniors. However, for the pass-fail or the pass option, as well as any of the online or e-learning opportunities, those will count for those juniors in their upcoming senior year.
Thank you very much. Related, and this is also for NCAA and NAIA, all current grades, class of 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. It is my understanding that when a district is completely pass, no pass, then a pass is acceptable. However, what about if the district provided choice of grade, pass or no pass? Will the student be expected to have a letter grade, or will pass still be sufficient if the student was given a choice? And so I don't know, maybe Felicia, you could answer first.
So for the senior this year, we will use pass or the letter grade. We'll use whatever is to the benefit of that student. For any of the additional years, for that freshman, sophomore, or upcoming junior, again, they'll get credit for the pass, and it will err on giving that student the benefit of it helping with meeting the standard.
Thank you. And Leah, do you have anything to add to that?
It's very similar in the sense that it's positively impacted students' eligibility, but for the NAI, there is no specific requirement in any type of core courses. So what we're looking at is the cumulative GPA, and it's on how the institution is calculating that. So if the school is including the pass or no pass into the GPA, then we would similarly factor that in. If they, however, are omitting that from the GPA, then that's the same, the omitted GPA would be used. If there is an instance where the student needed to rely on A's or B's to elevate their GPA and they could not as a result of going pass or no pass, then they would have the option to submit a request for an exception to a standing rule and have that reviewed by our eligibility committees. There is currently no standard across the board exception for that, but rather will be handled on a case-by-case basis.
Excellent, thank you. Another couple of questions here. There's a couple of questions about Division III, and so this is for NCAA. Will NCAA course requirements be altered for all the 3 division sports? If so, in what way? If students miss their main sports season for their junior year recruitments, how should they go about reaching out to NCAA college coaches? Is there a different requirement for outreach for each sport? Oh, actually, so that's not Division III, I'm sorry, for 3 division sports.
The first part of the question, Melanie, just to address the Eligibility Center is a service for D1 and D2 divisions only. And so for D3, that admission, that initial eligibility standard airs on the side of the admission standard for the university. So the Eligibility Center only works with D1 and D2 at this time. So for the question in and around recruitment and sport and reaching out to the coaches, if you would give a call to our legislative line or visit us on the website, we can get you the specifics in and around recruiting and any of the changes that might be helpful for that student.
All right. And then Felicia, also as a follow-up, there's just a comment around junior students being concerned that they won't be seen by coaches because of high school spring sports been canceled. And I assume that answer is the same, that they should be following up?
Yes, they should be. That is one of those areas as far as our governance and our AMA staff would be able to better support and get you some answers in and around that. I know that that is definitely a topic that our governance staff and our coaching community have been paying lots of attention to. And so any updates or additional information can be found on our website, or if you reach out to the Eligibility Center, we'll get you connected to the right source.
All right. And I'm afraid, Felicia, you're going to be on the spot for the next few questions. There are quite a few that are very specific to NCAA. One is, will the NCAA be accepting online courses taken over the summer or next year for those students who graduate in 2021?
The COVID-19 academic waiver is absolutely for spring 2020 and summer 2020 senior students. Anything beyond summer 2020, we will anchor to and adhere to the requirement as it is now. Best thing to do is to reach out to our talented high school review staff or give us a call on our contact center to get you some additional information so that you can hear the specifics and even visit the high school portal for any additional information around particular online sources and any assistance that your high school can get.
Thank you. And then related to that, are some questions around credit recovery programs like Edmentum or Plato. Are they going to be allowed or still count for eligibility for the summer of 2020 for underclassmen in high school? And will the NCAA be expanding the list of acceptable online course providers for 21, 22, and 23?
For spring 2020 and summer 2020, because of the disruption in and around the pandemic, e-learning, online learning, and any of the efforts that schools made to continue learning will be acceptable. That's spring 20 and summer 20. Beyond summer 2020, if you will review and anchor back to any of the information for those specific online or e-learning opportunities, we will use those going forward. For those juniors who were in the classes for spring 20 and summer 20, they will get credit for that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Felicia, there is a clarification on the legislative branch. Where on the website can they find that?
Is this the question in and around the governance information?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, so if we can, I think we've got, if you can go to the ncaa.org, and if the banner is still there, you should be able to click on the COVID-19 information. Once you click there, there's an amazing page with all kinds of videos and resources and research. And if you will scroll to the bottom, there are specifics around D1 and D2, as well as some recruiting information that might be helpful.
All right, it looks like Michael is navigating to that for folks as they're getting there.
I'm trying to anyway.
Mike, I think that the on Felicia's slide, there was the athletics, was her COVID-19 athletics page. And so if you just click there, that will give you that piece of information. There you go. Lots and lots of information. And
Yes.
all three of the centers have pages that have lots of information available. All right. Couple more questions. Looks like mostly NCAA. Because of COVID-19 and our block schedule, some of our students have been given the option to test out of the B portion of the class that they were not able to attend during the fourth term. In the past, NCAA has not accepted test outs. Are they going to be flexible this year?
There's lots of flexibility this year in and around even the adjustment with the initial eligibility standard. And so we want to review that once more for the COVID-19 academic automatic waiver relief. It's going to be provided to students, one, at the time of their of the evaluation. So once the information is uploaded to their accounts, there will be an evaluation. Actually, starting May 1, we began to apply the automatic waiver criteria to students who meet the standard. So with the COVID-19 standard, what we're looking at is if the student meets the core course progression requirement before the start of the 7th semester. So there's a possibility that before the spring 2020 semester, the students would meet the alternate standard, this pathway. So remember, for Division I, it's meeting the core course progression requirement, that's the 10-7. And so that would also be a 2.3 or higher GPA. And for our D2 student athletes, it's completing the 10 core course units before the start of the 7th semester and present a 2.2 or higher GPA. And so again, if you want to visit the Q&A, see if the question is addressed there, and if not, find us on the website or give us a call.
Thank you. I have a question that I think I've seen this go a couple of times, and I want to make sure. There are a couple of portal questions. There's one for NCAA, which is, can a high school have more than one NCAA portal account to upload a transcript? How do we create a second account? Because at my school, we have only one for the counselor, and we have to share the password every time we need to upload a transcript for our students in our caseload.
Yeah, we would prefer one account. And the reason the one account is really important is because that is also the opportunity for the high school to make updates, to assist us with any of the tasks that show up for the students. That's the one portal where, even as our high school review committee is working through those accounts, they're updating it. How about giving us a call? Let's see what's going on so that we can at least get that high school portal information. And the other thing is, for the portal, there should be at least 2 administrators for the portal. So there's a possibility that if you've had a change in staff, maybe there's a name there that is no longer an administrator. So the portal could also share with you who is the primary and secondary contact for that portal.
Great, thank
And
you.
in the NAI, the portal users, the main portal user can actually add additional users, both on the high school portal as well as on the registrar portal. So there can be more than one authorized individual per institution who can upload official records. Similarly, that is also the portal account where high school counselors will take action on approving fee waivers. And so you do need an approved account attached with that high school in order to take those actions, but more than one should be able to do it. And we would ask that we're not in a scenario where people are sharing passcodes, but they should have their own individual account to do that.
Thank you, Leah. Another question for NAIA. Will all students who do not meet initial eligibility be allowed to use the exception of 2.0 high school GPA with 2.0 college GPA after the first year, or only those students who do not have a test score?
Yeah, that's a great question. When our governing bodies looked at this, basically we erred on the side of flexibility. So rather than going to a scenario where only students who were negatively impacted by the testing services being down would receive the exception, we really went a more flexible route. So any student athlete who's classified as an entering freshman for this coming fall will have access to this exception. So that does mean that any student who otherwise would not have been eligible, but is now because they've graduated with a 2.0 cumulative GPA, will be eligible this fall. And then the other side of it is just that they need to meet that 2.0 collegiate GPA after the first year. And there was a question on here that I want to go ahead and address for everyone, that ordinarily students need to meet that 2.0 collegiate GPA after the conclusion of their sophomore year. So this is moving that up by 1 year. But that is only in the case that a student used the exception. If they otherwise meet the 2 of 3, they still graduate in the top half of their class and have the 2.0, then they've met the standard for entering freshman eligibility and don't need to meet the 2.0 until their conclusion of their sophomore year.
Thank you. This is a question actually that I think might be for all of the panelists. What will be the standard for college athletics to take place this fall in regards to the COVID situation? What are your thoughts? What have you discussed around the fall?
Melanie, it's Felicia. The NCAA has a couple of different advisory panels, experts who are evaluating COVID and health and safety and supporting universities as they make decisions for each region is what I'm going to refer to here. That information, again, the website that I gave, and I'm really encouraged by the updates and information that's been shared on that website. Also, each Friday evening, the Chief Medical Officer, Brian Hainline for the NCAA, has a webinar, a call where they're talking through the latest information. They're talking about the partnerships with medical field. They're talking about what state and federal standards are. And those decisions, unfortunately, I say unfortunately from the standpoint of each state and each region is in a different place. So those updates will continue to be on that website, but would absolutely encourage you to visit that COVID-19 page for any of the health and safety updates. I know the conference offices are working hard and having lots of meetings about what's going to be best for their particular conferences with the start of seasons, with integration with campus and those type things. So there are a lot of really important smart people helping to make those decisions.
Yeah, Felicia, great answer. I think there's the headline here is that folks are working diligently to basically address all the different potential ways that that students could be impacted in the fall. From the NAI's perspective, we're doing a number of things, and one of them is planning around if fall seasons are able to happen, and even if they happen in a modified way, then it's, you know, it's incumbent upon us to be ready to handle that and have our fall seasons. Our institutions look to us to use athletics as a really strategic part of the livelihood of their athletics programs, and in some cases the livelihood of their institutions overall. So we're working hard to ensure that we do everything possible just to make sure that that fall season happens, even if in a modified way. And at the same time, looking at the student health side of things. So I think Felicia hit the nail on the head there, that we're working hard, both from how to spin up a fall cycle, as well as how to make sure that we've got the health and safety of our student athletes at the forefront.
And from the NJCAA perspective, these two fine ladies have hit on everything. So thanks for stealing my thunder. But no, we many of the same things. How do we navigate this together? We're committed to having some type of fall season, but it's really going to come down to those state and local governments, as well as the federal government, and what some of the things add. So Felicia and Leah did an outstanding job of entertaining all that, and we're really following suit.
Thanks for that. There are a few more questions around transcripts, and it looks like they're for both NCAA and NAIA. Can students upload their unofficial transcripts due to COVID-19, or are they only allowed to have the school official upload these transcripts to either NCAA or NAIA?
For the NCAA Eligibility Center, of course, when we can get officials uploaded by an approved mean, we prefer that. But given COVID, there are exceptions being made with uploading academic documents. So we will accept an unofficial academic document if it is uploaded or emailed from the email address from the student's account. So again, we prefer the official route. High schools do have the opportunity to upload officials, but given COVID, if we can't get an official, an unofficial can be emailed from the student, from the account on the student's profile.
Yeah, great question. For NAI eligibility, the official high school transcript is still required through our online portal. The rationale behind this was we've been really plugged into the industry and working with our high school advisory groups and trying to just understand the field. And so far, we've heard that there is, even if it's remote, there largely still is access for the counselors to be able to access their official systems. So we are still requiring that the high school transcript come to us via that online portal. It is really the fastest way for the student to get their eligibility decision, since it comes directly from the source and populates directly into our system. It really positions the student in the best way possible to get them moved through and get their eligibility as fast as possible. So we felt that it was really important for us to continue to find ways to help students get streamlined through the eligibility process this year. So we are continuing to require that those transcripts come through the portal. From the collegiate transcript side, it is in NAI bylaws that official transcripts are required. We have in various, let's say, natural disasters in the past is a good example. We have had our governing bodies look at particular exceptions to this. And as of right now, we are still requiring official transcripts. But on a case-by-case basis, if we need to take a different approach, then that avenue is still available like it would be normally to apply for an exception. For the collegiate transcript side, those can be, like I said, uploaded directly through those portal accounts, which is the best way to do it. But if not, then they can also be mailed or sent through e-vendors like Parchment, National Student Clearinghouse, eScriptSafe, etc.
Thanks, Leah. There was also a question about the Naviance portal. Can any of you who take transcripts through Naviance, can you address that question? It's not clear which agency this question is for.
Yeah, I'm not so familiar with that portal. I don't believe that it's one of the accepted methods that we're connected with. But there are some portals where if you're requesting a transcript be sent through that service, they might have ways of still sending the transcript via the mail if, for example, we're not an acceptable location for that. So I'm not exactly sure how that works, but I just on the chat said that the ways in which we can receive those transcripts is through our NAI portal, through Parchment, National Student Clearinghouse, or eScriptSafe, or of course mailed to us.
Melanie, for the NCAA Eligibility Center, we accept Naviance.
Great, thank you. Another question around scholarships. Now that current NCAA and NAIA athletes are being given 2 more semesters of eligibility, will schools be given more scholarships to give out, or will the current limits still exist? Not sure if someone has a question that they would like to, or thought on that. No.
So I'll take this from the NAI side. The NAI does scholarshiping in a unique way. So each sport has a scholarship limit in terms of the total number of full scholarships that can be given out. However, basically the school has the flexibility to divvy up that scholarship money in any sort of combination that they want to the max dollar value that number of full scholarships would equate to. So there is no limit, for example, in the total headcount number of scholarships that can be given out, but rather in that dollar value amount. So because that lends itself to a lot of flexibility, institutions still have that ability to make adjustments and give out scholarships in a variety of ways. Our governing bodies are looking at this and just trying to decide and understand if there are additional implications that need to be looked at from a financial aid standpoint. The Council of Presidents through the NAI governing structure is actually already working on a financial aid task force to look at kind of a variety of issues that might need to have policy changes attached with them anyway. And so we'll be providing detailed information on some of these changes that is coming out of those conversations. And in the meantime, we will post any updates to our COVID-19 page, but this is an important area that our governing bodies are looking into.
Melanie, there's not much more I can add outside of what Leah has already shared. There, of course, has been a lot of media and conversation in and around finances and the impact of COVID. The governing bodies did get together and had some conversation in and around making exceptions so those senior student athletes who did not get to participate in their senior semester would have the opportunity to return. As far as the finances in and around that, it did not include additional scholarship numbers as far as per sport or per institution. Again, that COVID-19 update in and around what D1, D2, and D3 are doing with the current state and changes that are being made to current legislation or adjustments that are being made for this day and time can be found there. I will say that people are spending, meaning the membership, our institutions, presidents, ADs are spending lots and lots of time being diligent and thoughtful in and around care and concern for students and making sure that those opportunities are there. As far as the financial model, again, those updates will be in and around that COVID-19 page, but that's where they are right now. It's a good question.
And from the NJCAA perspective, we kept our current numbers the same for new scholarships, but those who were affected negatively that are returning for an additional year, schools were allowed to keep them above the number of scholarships that corresponds with LOIs for this 1 year exemption.
Thanks all for that. I have a very specific question for NCAA. And the question is, for the core course GPA for Division II, will the GPA be calculated with only the courses that were completed before the 7th semester, or can courses after the 7th semester be calculated into their GPA? And before I pass that on, I want to thank Gary DeCastro, who has given some clarifying that says the D2 course GPA used for the COVID auto waiver is based on core courses taken prior to the 7th semester. Should the student not be eligible for that waiver, a complete evaluation based on the student's full high school record will be completed. The follow-up question to that for the NCAA is, if they do not meet the auto waiver, do they still have to complete the 16 courses? So Felicia, that's for you, a technical one.
Yes, what we would say is that if they're not meeting the COVID-19 automatic waiver, that student should still strive to meet the standard, but would encourage that athletic academic compliance officer or academic support to take a hard look at that student's profile and give us a call to see if there are other options for that student.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, we are pretty near the end. I think that that will have to be the last question because we are at 2:58. Any further questions that we have, we will definitely round these up, distribute them amongst our panelists, and get those questions answered and shared. So thank you very much for all of your help in all of your excellent questions and the answers, excellent answers from our panelists.
Awesome. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Felicia and Dr. Parker. This was great. I hope everyone found it helpful.
Well, thank you all very much.
Next slide, Michael. Just as a quick wrap up, AACRAO has put together, AACRAO Consulting has put together express consulting sessions, which are heavily discounted at a price of $995 in if there are specific institutional questions that are more granular and more unique, then can be answered in a session like this. If you have a need or a request of that sort, please contact consulting@acrao.org to get started. Next slide. I would like to just announce that you should save the date for the upcoming coffee break topics. On Friday, May 22nd, we will be hosting a conversation on instructional planning for the summer and the fall in this COVID-19 time. As institutions are making decisions and trying to adapt what their fall and what their summer enrollments will look like, we will have a group of panelists who will talk through institutional planning and decision making. Additionally, on Friday, May 29th, we will have AACRAO International presenters talking about protecting your institution from academic records fraud. More information and registration for these coffee breaks are available online at acrao.org/COVID guidance. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend.